Is BYU too predictable on offense? In this video, I'm going to be going through BYU's 2024 offensive play calling and assigning grades to different categories in order to find out if they're being too predictable in their play calling. Now, first, we've got to define what does predictable mean if we're going to do this kind of a video. So I've identified 5 different ways that you could say an offense can be predictable. It could be through personnel, through down and distance tendencies, running and passing in specific down and distance situations all the time, that sort of thing. Their formations, or if they have limited variety of run plays or passing concepts. So I'm going to be going through and giving a grade to the 2024 BYU offense for each of these categories. And then, yeah, just one more thing to note before we get into this, right? Coaches watch all that film for a reason. Every offense has tendencies and patterns that a defense can identify and exploit. And also, there's only so many plays you can realistically install into a playbook. You're going to have to, um, you know, rely on a finite number of plays in your offense. And so, because of that, there's always going to be some element of predictability to a college football offense. But with that being said, some do it better than others, and let's see how BYU stacks up. So the first thing, and this is a major negative point in the 2024 offense, is that depending on the personnel, the specific players that were in the game, it was very predictable what BYU was going to do. Now, this is an article from a while back from Casey Lundquist, and he identified that specifically honing in on the tight ends when Keanu Hill and Reiner Swanson were on the field, BYU threw the football 68 and 69% of the time, respectively. And when the other tight ends, Ray Paulo, Ethan Erickson, and Matava Taase were on the field, those were situations where BYU ran the ball, especially Ray Paulo, often as that second tight end or H-back coming in. It was 78% run when he was on the field. And you'll notice that Taase, he had the most balanced run pass breakdown when he was on the field, and that is part of why he got so many reps in this offense. And the good news is, as this article indicated, having a more of a do-it-all tight end in Carson Ryan coming into the program this year, that should help BYU to be a little more unpredictable, to where teams can't just identify like, okay, that's the pass catching tight end that's on the field. Let's shift into a zone versus okay, that's the run blocking tight end. Let's creep up to the line of scrimmage and plug those running lanes. So, not a strong point in 2024, but definitely some hope for that to get better in the future. Next thing we're going to look at is the down and distance predictability. I actually think this was something that BYU did very well in 2024. This chart's got a lot going on. But basically, on the vertical axis, you have the proportion of run versus pass on each down, and it's broken down into 4 graphs for first, second, third, and fourth down, respectively. And then left to right, you have the distance to go. So a couple key things to hone in on. We'll look at 1st and 10 here. And you can see it's actually quite 50-50 between the pass in green and the run in the purple. And that is a good sign for any offense. When you can be very balanced on first down, defenses have to play both the run and the pass out of the 1st and 10 look. That helps you be more efficient and more successful on first down. The next thing I want to look at is second down, and specifically second and short and second and medium over here. So you can see these are big running downs for the BYU offense, but they're also big play action downs because of how often they run the ball. That does create some opportunities for those play action shot plays that this BYU offense really relies on to pick up those chunk plays. So, BYU really wants to get into those second and medium, second and short situations because that allows you to have the threat of the play action game um, into your offense, which makes you so much tougher to defend. And then finally, looking in at third down, you can see third and short, they, have a strong tendency to run. We also have talked about in previous videos about how they're very willing to go for it on fourth and short. So you can see, you know, even a 25% uh, probability of running on third and four, third and five. This philosophy, offensively, right or wrong, is that, if it's third down, we think we have 2 downs to pick up the yards. We don't have to get it all on third down. So expect that to continue going forward in 2025 as well. But overall, I was very pleased um, with the balance between run and pass that this kind of graphic displays, and then yeah, it just really shows you that when BYU can get into second and short, and they can either just keep running the ball to pick up the first down, or they can hit a play action shot. That is when their offense was at its most efficient in 2024. So hopefully we can see more of that going forward. Now another uh, area that leaves a little bit to be desired is just their formation predictability, and specifically just not a huge variety out of formations sometimes. Specifically, BYU almost never went under center except in goal line situations or trick play situations. So, when you did see the quarterback go under center, it kind of tips off the defense that something's up, either a backward pass or jet sweep or quarterback sneak or something's coming in. Retzlaff mostly operated out of the shotgun, but there was some pistol mixed in as well. I do like the way BYU utilizes the pistol, and I would like to see more of it going forward. As we talked about a little bit before, two tight end formations were a big run tell. Often they would have one tight end come in motion to run block. Now that is, an effective way to run the ball, but does kind of let the defense know what's coming a little bit. I thought they had decent run pass balance out of their three wide receiver formations. Obviously, that's more of a passing set, but they did run the ball well out of that at times. This grade was raised a little bit by some creative formations that they began to deploy more late in the year, such as pistol with three running backs or shotgun with two running backs, to stress the defense in new ways with the talent they have at the running back position. So hopefully we can see more of that creativity next year as well. But ultimately, it seems like if you're a defense that was playing BYU last year, you could follow this flow chart. If any of these conditions were met, you would expect run. Otherwise, you'd expect pass. And the conditions would be quarterback under center, two or more tight ends on the field, or if they're out of the pistol. And then, out of the shotgun with only one tight end or zero tight ends on the field, it was a very strong pass indication. So, you know, obviously, um, you pick your formation to uh, give the plays greater chance of success, but I don't want to see it get to a point where you know what's coming by formation, which it did feel like that was the case at times last year. And then another thing that I'm not super loving is the run variety or lack thereof from the BYU offense. Now I've identified five run concepts that BYU really seem to like. So that'd be inside zone and inside zone split. These are represented up at the top right here. So inside zone, you have an inside handoff to running back with the offensive lineman blocking not as predetermined man, but just an area. So in this situation, they'd block off to their right, just whoever is there. Zone split is similar, except you'll have someone, like a tight end, coming back across the formation with a kickout block or sift block. So you saw a lot of that out of BYU last year. Another one, especially out of the shotgun, you see is the speed option. I really like the way BYU uses the speed option. I'm really surprised watching how much success BYU has with it that other teams don't do more of it. It just doesn't seem like a concept that a lot of teams really like to run. But I've been very impressed with the way that multiple quarterbacks in this BYU offense through the past 5, 6 seasons have been able to have success in the speed option game. Even some of them that aren't necessarily huge running threats have been able to help running backs pick up extra yards just by holding that edge defender for just a half second with speed option look. Another one's outside zone, similar to inside zone, except this is going more of an off tackle instead of an inside run. This is often run out of the pistol. When Tyler Algier was at BYU, this was a play that they would run for him all the time, and he was very successful at it. But it is a little tough to run out of the shotgun because it kind of forces your back to run sideways for a little bit to get to those outside gaps. So something that if we want to see more of, we might need to see a little bit more pistol or under center looks. And then finally, of course, the jet sweep. BYU has a lot of speed at the receiver position, and they like to get them involved in the run game or the quick pass game as much as they can. So you'll continue to see that going forward. But yeah, as we've kind of talked about, when you're in shotgun all the time, it's hard to run much besides inside zone and inside zone split. Of course, they would deploy the speed option to get the running backs out in space, but that was kind of it out of the shotgun at times. It felt like, yeah, obviously run the speed option very well. Now, I did feel like with both the run concepts as well as just a lot of things with this offense throughout the year, I think they got better as the year went on. You saw some different concepts like more counter, more variations of the speed option where you'd have the running back go the opposite direction. So hopefully they can add more wrinkles in here and not just have this very limited run variety that I feel like makes it tough for your running backs to consistently get yardage, get to that second and third level. And also, I would like to see more outside zone next year. I really like this concept, and I think it's been successful in this offense. So hopefully, we can see more of a return to that next year. Here are some of those plays I described. So here is a look at zone split. If you'll forgive my illustration skills a little bit. Here we've got kind of a two tight end look with the receiver tight end coming across in motion and then having this sift block the other direction. And then the rest of the offensive linemen, tight end, are just zone blocking to the right. And the running back's just hitting this hole. And, depending on where those blocks are, he's finding a hole and hitting it. So that is a core concept for the BYU offense and one that you will see all the time for as long as this current play calling regime is around. Here's this reverse speed option that we talked about. They ran this in the Alabama Bowl successfully. So it's the same old speed option, except we're going to have the running back come behind the quarterback. I think this is a great example of how you can just add little wrinkles, so you're not changing the play entirely, but just, you know, sending it to the opposite side and giving it maybe a little bit more chance of success. Defense a little less ready for it. And here's one of those creative formations we talked about. This is a three running back pistol look. They ran against Utah and some other teams late in the season. And this is like a counter action to the tailback with these up backs blocking, lead blocking for it. So yeah, another example of how you can run a familiar concept like counter out of a unique formation and have some more success with it. So yeah, I would like to see more of this creativity being deployed this year as well. And finally, we'll get into the pass game. Again, I felt like BYU's pass variety was limited at times, especially early in the season. Part of this is that some receivers it seemed like ran full diverse route trees, specifically Chase Roberts and Darius Lassiter, but some others seemed to run the same few routes or only line up in the slot or only line up outside or something over and over. And so, I think that this offense really appreciates having receivers that can line up in different spots and run complete route trees. But for whatever reason, it seems like some of these receivers didn't have, you know, more than just a couple different routes called for them over and over. So definitely something that uh, makes your offense a little more predictable if you aren't having receivers run this entire route tree. A few pass concepts that I've identified that BYU seem to love on passing downs, and I'll illustrate these in the coming slides. But the floods concept, where you're sending multiple receivers into a single zone and a zone coverage, trying to overload that defender and fit the ball in somewhere. Bench, this often run with a out route and a corner route on the same time. Again, kind of stressing the defender's in zone coverage to pick and choose between one of them and leave the other open. Comebacks and hooks. You'll see these especially out of the RPO look. You'll also see sometimes run the RPO with multiple hooks or multiple slants on the same side. Yeah, really just kind of taking advantage of the fact that the defenders will often play at different levels, which will leave one of those hooks or one of those slants open. And then another one you'll see them go to at times is this little rub screen or line screen action, where you have an outside receiver come in and block and set up a screen for an inside receiver. One major negative is, as we're all aware, BYU called this 4-by-1 goal line fade 3 different times. And the first time it picked up TD, or actually 2-point conversion against SMU, but the next 2 times it was picked off. And that is a major concern if you have, what apparently is a go-to play in a goal line pass type situation that, teams are figuring out. It seems like they know what's coming and are intercepting. So, hopefully they can either find a way to tweak that play or introduce some more um, variety into that short area passing situation to have a little bit more success and keep the defense honest in those situations. And finally, just important to note, as we've already talked about, the BYU's passing attack is at its best out of play action. That is really where you see a lot of these big shots down the field come from, is out of that, fake zone, fake outside zone, and then hit the deep cross or the deep post or the 9 ball. And here are some of those concepts to illustrate. So this flood could look a couple different ways, but often you'll have an outside receiver run a clear out route, an inside receiver run a corner and out route, and then a running back or tight end or third receiver running a shorter route underneath. And the idea is to try to hit one of these two outbreaking routes, depending on what this defender does that has that outside zone coverage responsibility. This is of course, the notorious goal line fade. It's drawn here as a true four receiver on the same side, but often this would be a running back motioning out for that swing route. All 3 times BYU just immediately took this fade. But I actually think that there's opportunities to take this shallow cross from the number 2 receiver. It potentially could have picked up some conversions if we didn't just immediately take that pre-snap read to throw the fade. So, if this is going to continue to be part of the playbook, and I suspect that it will, I would like to see them, show that they're willing to take some of these other options on the four receiver side, keep the defense a little more honest. And finally, here's this rub screen action. Um, where you have the outside receiver coming down on the crack motion, and then the ball is intended to go to this inside receiver breaking out. Hopefully, the wide receiver can go 2 for 1 here and occupy both their defender and the inside receiver's defender. Um, this can also be run to a tight end. They would do that in the past with Isaac Rex a lot. So, not one that maybe comes up all the time, but in certain gotta have it situations, you really saw BYU turn to this.